Hello, my name is Matthew, also known as MTWolf2270 on the FindMall community. In our past couple of videos, we've been talking about Minelab XChange 2's software, the waypoint feature. And we've specifically been talking about how to create waypoints inside Exchange 2 or how to bring data in and import a waypoint. But there's another option for using the waypoint, an option that I like to use that's thinking a little bit outside the box. And what this is using a waypoint to substitute for a find point. I know this happens to me, and I'm sure it's happened to you. You're out hunting somewhere, you get really excited because you get a really good find, and you just don't remember to create a find point for it. You move on, you start detecting, and you don't create that find point. And then you get home and you think, oh no, I didn't create a find point. Now I have absolutely no way, because it's the only good thing I got at that site, I have no way to put that in my Exchange 2. Well, just because you didn't create a find point doesn't mean that that's lost forever. You can simply create a waypoint, put in the data, change the parameters, and basically use the waypoint as a find point. It's still a waypoint, but for all intents and purposes, you're converting it to a find point. So what I've done here is I have taken an area in New York City, Central Park. I've never hunted in Central Park. I don't know if you even can hunt in Central Park, but I wanted to create some false find points, waypoints being used as find points to illustrate this point in a place that's not obviously my hunting grounds or anybody else's hunting grounds. So none of this is real. It's all made up just for this tutorial. But each of these three white dots are actually waypoints, but are being used for the purposes of find points. So if we take this one up here, for example, this one right here that's bouncing, and we go into the details of it, it's an 1896 Barber Dime. I changed the date and time by clicking Edit to reflect a fictitious hunt on June the 4th at 3:34 p.m. So when you create these, you can always go back and change the time. That's one part that you will be able to keep as you would with a find point. You won't have all your screen, your setting data and all that information. However, you can in the description area, since you know how your machine is set up, simply type up what settings you were running and what numbers you got that prompted you to dig in the first place. So you can still put a lot of the same data that you would for a find point. Even though this says it's a waypoint, I have this set up with the information just as if it was a find point. So it is in effect becoming a find point. So to create this, I created several of these just for that purpose and put them on the map. So let's say we were going back to a place we'd already been. And this would work in any folder, in any category, any place that you've ever been. And if it's a place that you had never been before and you didn't create a find point, it's still not lost because as in the previous videos, we simply create a waypoint through the search engine or through another map software and use that waypoint in the same feature, change the information, and turn it into a find point. But if it's an area we've been to before, we simply go in that folder, go to that place, click and drag, create a waypoint just like we would in any other scenario, but put that data in to reflect that of the find that you found. Now, let's say another thing, if it's a particular house, it's not a big park or it's not a big watering hole or it's not a big swim area or beach, it's an individual address, an individual place. Again, in any folder, we would bring up that individual find point. If we brought up the individual find point, in this case, it's this one, if we went and looked on the map for that find point, we could scroll down, zoom in like this, using the wheel on the mouse. We could zoom in, drop and drag a find point, and let's say right here, this is a place that we found an amazing find. We found an 1864 Indian head. So I'm going to put 1864 Indian. And we found it at this location. Again, we can change the date to reflect the date that we were actually hunting. We'll say it's the 11th, and we'll say that we found it at 1:22 in the afternoon. We could put that it was ringing in as 11:35. I'm just throwing numbers out. It might have been 12:35. A lot of my Indians will ring in the 11:35, 11:34 range. But you can put that information, you can put whatever else you wanted, any other pertinent data, you could attach a picture to it, just like you would a find point. Again, you have the longitude and latitude. Now let's go ahead and save this as a new find point. So it's here as an 1864 Indian, the date that we found it, it's now showing on the map. All we have to do, if this was a revisited area and we were in a folder of a different place that we had hunted and we needed to be in this year's Land 2013 folder, but we were actually revisiting a site that we visited from the Land 2012 folder. Just like you would anything else, you highlight it, drop, drag, and place it in the Land 2013, and now it's in the appropriate folder where you need it to be. So that's a simple way that you can create a waypoint and use it and substitute it as a find point. If you didn't want to go through the trouble of zooming on the map, you could open your individual place, your individual find point, take that find point data, write down the longitude and latitude. Once you write that down, you simply open your waypoint, type in your longitude and latitude, name it what you want, put your description in, change your parameters, save it, drop and drag it, put it in the appropriate folder, put it where you want to be, or create it within that folder. That's the other way that you can do this. I find this to be a very useful feature. This is something that I have adopted the waypoint to for me to replace find points when I forget to make those find points. Yes, it's still a waypoint, but you've turned it into a find point. And another place that this is a really, really useful feature is a lot of times I'm not always using the CTX. If I'm, say, water hunting and I'm in a swim area, I don't have the GPS capability that the CTX provides. But I can find the swim hole on the map. And the exact location in a swim hole or a beach isn't as important as in, say, a big field. But if I was in a big field, I'd probably have a handheld GPS that would give me that information. You would simply use the other video tutorials, find that swim hole on the map, create the waypoint, and bring it in here. And even though you're using an XCal or you're using a GPX and you're out doing relic hunting, it doesn't matter. You can still use the waypoint to create a find point for a unit that doesn't have the GPS feature. And you could even take that one step further by clicking over on an Add New Collection, call it XCal, let's say, and this would mean anytime I'm water hunting with the XCal, we'll give it an icon and we'll make it blue. We'll save it. Now I have an XCal folder. I can use the same techniques that we just discussed, put the information into the XCal folder, and I'm tracking all of my finds in one place through Minelab XChange 2. I hope this helps. This may not be for everybody, but it's a little option that I've adopted for myself that works well for me. My name is Matthew, MT Wolf 2270. Thank you.